And good afternoon from Philadelphia. Frank here with another episode of UFO News Network Sunday. Today we have a very special guest, and I'm going to turn things right over to Chant, my co-host, to introduce him. Chant, go ahead.
Hi, Frank. Thank you so much. We have a wonderful guest today. His name is Dean Ashley. He's a friend of Frank and I, and he's married with 2 children, born and raised in St. Louis, graduated college with a BA in English, joined the Navy in 1996, became an aviation electronics technician, and served for a little over 4 years. When I asked him to share a little bit about himself, he said, gained the rank of E5, but decided the civilian world was better suited for me. Eventually found a job as depot level FLIR technician and have been in the same position ever since. I have worked on a variety of FLIRs, both old and new, analog and digital. I have seen more things in the sky with FLIRs over the years with different systems that make me believe that I'm somewhat of an expert in the field. I'm not alone. There are others in my shop, but they aren't interested in commenting. Welcome, Dean, to the show. How are you?
Doing great. How are you two today?
Doing fantastic, great. Dean. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to spend a little bit of time explaining the topic that you do research on today, and also wanted to ask you, who do you work for?
Well, I'm a defense contractor for a government agency. Those type things I like to keep to myself because I'm still working on these government contracts and I don't want to jeopardize my livelihood. But it is a 3-letter agency. It's pretty big, and we'll just leave it at that for now.
That's fine. You know, we have a lot of guests, actually, high-profile guests too, who work in defense contract type of positions, and they definitely feel the same way you do. Researching this topic kind of puts them in that position. So it's interesting. We all have a passion for the same topic, but we want to at least keep some semblance of privacy in our lives. Wanted to ask you, could you please tell me, do you recall the first moment that you felt the impetus to actually want to get to marry the topic of FLIR technology to the topic of UFOs or UAPs, or you go ahead and tell us what topic that is?
Okay. Looking back, I've always been kind of a fan of science fiction and whatnot, but I've never seen anything that would make me a real believer. Until I saw something that made me a skeptic, which was the Aguadilla, Puerto Rico UFO case that I stumbled across online when it was done by the SCU at the time, Scientific Coalition for Ufology. So I contacted them through their hyperlink, and from there I started talking to some of the people, and let's see, I was talking to Rich Hoffman, and Robert Powell. So we kind of went through the whole thing, and I took the video to the shop and I showed my coworkers, and you know, all our years of combined experience, we couldn't really come up with something that was a feasible theory. So that's where I kind of remain today, is that video freaked me out. A lot of people are going to say it's a Mylar balloon or it was a pelican or whatever, but not from what we've seen on the videos, because we get sent videos by pilots, avionics techs and stuff to analyze problems, system problems, and we see that, and we also run the systems out back. So we've seen plenty of video, and that just didn't jive with the kind of things that we're used to seeing. That was the first moment.
Dean, real quick, what was it about the Aguadilla video that led you to believe it wasn't Mylar balloons or birds?
I think it was the heat of the object, and there was no obvious propulsion. I mean, I understand a balloon will. It seemed like linear in travel. It just a balloon is more erratic. It'll go with the wind, but in order for this object to just travel in this linear fashion, it just didn't seem right. And I know that the plane is going a different direction than the balloon, and there might be some differences in elevation and whatnot, but it just seemed like it didn't seem right, you know. The heat, usually if you're going to have a drone or a Mylar balloon, Mylar balloons are going to be cold, especially at that time of night. It was like, I think, 9 o'clock at night. And this was pretty hot. It was like the heat of an engine, or over 100, 140 degrees, something like that. But
Okay.
that's what kind of made it stood out, because you're going to see, if it's a drone, you'll see the motors, you'll see the props. It didn't jive.
Okay. And how are you able to look at that piece of video and determine the heat that it's giving off? And how do you know that it's about 140 degrees?
I'm not going to say it's that temperature exactly, because that's really hard to assess.
Just approximately. Let's say between 100 and 200 degrees, whatever. How are you able to determine the temperature by looking at the video, or a temperature range?
Yeah, you see things in the background, like you see the cars driving on the street. I think at one point there was an engine on the tarmac. There's other things to compare it to, but it gets kind of tricky. All I know, it was hot to the air that it was traveling through, because otherwise a balloon, which is made out of that kind of tinfoil mylar, it's going to cool down quickly and it wouldn't retain that heat. So that's what it's it's kind of hard to explain, but I'm just comparing that compared to the other objects in the background.
Okay, and the Aguadilla, that was a FLIR video as well?
Yes,
okay,
it was.
Okay.
Now, I want to let me try to make a distinction. FLIR is a forward-looking infrared, not to be confused with FSI, which is FLIR Systems Inc. Now, sometimes they're used interchangeably, but when I say it's a FLIR video, that just means it's an infrared video that's airborne.
It's sort of like, not to jump in, I think I'll clear this up for us, at least some older folks. They used to call a lot of folks would call every copy machine a Xerox machine. Would that be about the same? Hello?
Yes, that's a good comparison.
Okay. Oh, yeah, keep going. Sorry about that.
Not a problem. Where were we?
I like talking about the difference between what a FLIR is. I was listening to you, actually. Can you elaborate a little bit more if there's any subtle or big differences, if people have any misconceptions about what FLIR is?
Well, yeah, and if you could explain the difference between FLIR and night vision, because I know a lot of folks go out on sky watches and whatnot, and there's a lot of night vision floating around as well, goggles and cameras and so on. So if you could explain those differences, that'd be great.
Sure. Okay, let's cover the FLIR thing real quick. Different manufacturers. Our shop takes in different manufactured FLIRs. Some are in Canada, some are in Portland, some are in Boston, that kind of thing. But you're working on a variety of different ones, and we get factory trained, that kind of thing. As far as the difference between infrared, that's a very good question, because let's start at visible light, which is like 400 to 700 nanometers. And that covers your rainbow spectrum there.
Yep.
And then go into the near IR, which is about, I'm just going to say about 900 nanometers.
Okay.
So that's going to be your video systems, like your closed circuit television. You got your cameras that are mounted, and they have like an array of LEDs around the actual CCD or charge couple device. So at night, it needs illumination to see what's on the ground, what you're looking at. So that's where that array of LEDs comes in play, because it'll switch over. It says, hey, like a photodiode or something will say, hey, look, it's now nighttime. We need to turn the LEDs on and illuminate this source. So that's still working in kind of a visible spectrum. But when you're getting into shortwave infrared, which is like kind of like the 1 to 3 micrometer, then you're kind of overlapping the heat and the visible spectrum. But what I deal with mostly is midwave, which is like 3 to 5 micrometer. So that is strictly thermal imaging. So it doesn't care about light anymore. It just cares about heat. And that's where people have a confusion, because unless you use these systems a lot, you're not going to understand that the difference between the two. You can take 2 flashlights. Let's say you have an old incandescent bulb flashlight and an LED flashlight. Well, if you shine them both at the FLIR, it's going to see the bulb one easier because it sees the heat. It's not going to see the LED one at all because they're relatively not heat generating. So you have to kind of relearn what you're seeing on the screen, and it confuses a lot of people.
Okay.
And, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Chant. Go ahead.
Well, I just was going over the Aguadilla report, which I have in front of me, and I also shared the link to that in the chat room that we have going on the podcast. And this Aguadilla report, as you were talking about, Dean, which was written up by folks from the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies, I noticed in it says, in the conclusion part of it, the problem with assigning the temperature variation to low pressure zones is that variations with the same order of magnitude are seen to be occurring in areas away from the unknown object. So there could be issues regarding assigning temperature variation to low pressure zones. So there's all kinds of potential challenges that a person might deal with regarding studying UAPs in the sky with FLIR technology. Is that right?
That's very right. And there's also the issue of the auto gain and auto level within the FLIR that automatically adjusts the gain and level depending on the scene that it's looking at. So there's going to be, you can't really say, oh, it's going to be 180 degrees because it's automatically adjusting the white, gray, black gradients to what it's looking at.
Okay.
Looking at a jet engine, it's going to tone things down. It's not going to be sharp. Again, this is hard to describe.
No, it's okay. You don't even have to use layman language all the time because there are people who will listen to a show who are at expert level. So see, if you can do layman language and the expert language, that's fine.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, it's just an auto gain, auto level. It's a fluctuation in the scenes that you will be seeing. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and then also, go ahead.
Dean, I want to jump in here real quick with a question. Now, on the actual Raytheon at FLIR pod display information, now it looks like what you would look at when you look in the viewfinder of sort of any camera where it's got different measurements available. And do you know if the infrared level, the height of the wavelengths, is that an adjustable kind of thing, or is that pretty well set?
No, that should be an adjustable thing, at least from the systems that I work with. You can go annual gain and level and adjust it just the situation. I don't see why they wouldn't make a manual gain or level even at the FLIRs, because you're going to encounter certain situations where the auto gain level isn't going to do what you want it to, so you're going to want to be able to, manipulate it to your likings.
Okay, now on the screen now, I don't know if you have that available, but
yes,
the at FLIR display in the on the right hand side under where it says LST, I saw the same number on a couple of different videos, 1688. Do you know if that's the adjustment for the wavelength levels for the infrared light spectrum, or do you just not know what that is, or?
I'm wearing my glasses, but I'm having a hard time seeing. You say it's LST?
Yeah, it's on the right side of the display, and there's nothing there describing what it is or what it does.
Yeah, I have a shared screen going, Frank. Are you talking about the picture you have right now?
Yeah, it's going to be to the right under where it says LST. You've got two numbers, 1688 and 1688.
Oh, I see it. Okay, Dean, do you see it right there? My arrow's going over it, LST.
Okay. Maybe it's like laser slant, or maybe they're doing some kind of slant range.
Okay.
But it doesn't have anything to do with the manual gain or levels.
Okay.
So I wanted to also ask you a little bit more about this Aguadilla report, because in there it also talks about this. It says, some arguments have been advanced that the object, regarding again the Aguadilla report, could be a balloon, and that the motion of the balloon relative to the background is an illusion created by the motion of the plane circling the balloon. That is incorrect. There are some frames of video having no background motion at all, and the UAP can be seen changing locations relative to the background. There's folks, and I have seen this too. I've seen a few videos where people are vehemently exclaiming and explaining that this Aguadilla object was a balloon. Why was it not a balloon, in your opinion, Dean?
Yeah, we'll go back to the nature of the travel. Because if the balloon was flying, let's just across the island, then you would see more changes in elevation, because a balloon just doesn't fly in a straight line, and it doesn't. I know it was kind of like
that makes sense, actually. What you
balloon
just said.
around, and it's just happily floating in the air, So this just looked like it was headed a certain direction, and then of course when it gets to the ocean, it goes under the water. From what it looks like, there's been a lot of what that was, and then when it pops out of the water and it splits into two objects, that's another line of speculation, because people have said, "Oh no, it's a."
That it was a bundled mylar balloon, so that's why it appeared to do that. That's the claim.
Or said, "Oh, it's something that's a idiosyncrasy with the FLIR camera," and I still say no, they don't do that. I've never seen them do that, but I'm just speculating. I look at it and I say, that's weird. I show other people in the shop, oh, that's weird,
Yeah, and that also brings up another question that I have for you, and that is not just with the Aguadilla report regarding this object that seemed to have some kind of intelligence that was dictating where it went, but also in many reports around the world. There are objects that are reported traversing at incredibly high speeds. Obviously, there's some kind of form of intelligence directing the object, whether it's something inside the craft, if there is a craft, or it's a drone-related object. What I wanted to ask you is, do you ever rely on your gut feeling, common sense, so to speak, or rationalizing it through gut feeling, saying, this feels like this is not a balloon. This feels like it's not a drone. This feels like it could be something else. Do you ever go by gut feeling?
Yeah, sometimes that's all I have, because there's no explanation to it. So the weirdest thing that I see is I look at things in terms of motion, and when we look out back with the systems, when I look up in the sky, if something's circling, it's a bird. If something's traveling in a linear fashion, then it's a plane. Could be a couple like that one right there. That's a what is that? That's a P3. So that's a close up, because we're kind of close to NAS jacks. But okay, right, there you go. That's a P8. So I see these things all the time, and see the spiking of the engines there and the flaring. That's typically what a jet engine looks like. It looks like one of those little balls that would stick to your sock when you were a kid. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
The little hitchhikers, or whatever they call them.
Yep.
It fluctuates, but that's what you're going to see.
Now, getting to the videos that have been released by the Defense Department, the three, the FLIR, the Gimbal, and the Go Fast videos, you've taken a closer look at all those, and what about those really got your attention?
The gimbal is the one that rotates, right?
Right.
Okay, yeah. The FLIR and the Go Fast, those are interesting, but the one that really caught my attention was the gimbal. And I've been arguing with skeptics for quite some time now, but it's how crisp the image remains, because you see these things flying and you see the heat signature that it gives you. It's kind of erratic, but the gimbal one just kind of remains a consistent form, and it's crisp. And then when it does that rotation, to me, just on layman's terms, it looks like you're adjusting like a potentiometer on a motor. It's just it rolls in a very odd fashion that I don't normally see. I have recorded F-18s flying, and I recorded one banking to the left, and it didn't have the same signature as the one on gimbal. So, you can
tell, you can get an idea of what the craft is by the heat signature, can you not?
Yeah, no, definitely, because that's Okay, you got the F-18 video up there now.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you just a random question about radar, whether you're an expert on radar or not. How do you feel about the possibility of radar regarding a UAP being used as proof that there was a UFO or a UAP? Again, I understand that means unidentified object, you know what I'm saying here, but that it's not an airplane or whatever, but radar being used to determine as proof that it's not an airplane. Do you believe that? That can be used as proof or evidence, radar?
I do. There's I don't have any personal experience with repairing radar or operating it in an aircraft, but I I have been approached by a pilot who talked to us in the shop, and this is maybe 12, 13 years ago. He came into our shop and he said, "Hey, look, I saw this thing on the aircraft. It was an older FLIR system, but he said it was kind of cigar shaped, and he said his radar just pinged out, is the way he said. It was all nines, so it wouldn't give him any." He said the object just moved at an incredible rate of speed, and his radar in the aircraft was showing him something ridiculous. So it was corresponding in that fashion, but that's about all that comes to mind. All I can give you on that.
Okay. And then I just wanted to ask you a different question, and that is, when you were a kid, and then you went into like high school and then college, at what point were you fascinated by technology that allowed people to record events in the sky? Were you recording all along, or at what point did you become fascinated by the equipment to use to do what you do?
I guess when I started my FLIR job that I'm doing now, I never was a sky watcher, or I'll look up in the sky every once in a while, but I'm just like anybody else in that regards. It didn't really start catching my attention until I saw the Aguadilla case, and then I had my own little sighting in the back. I don't think I've told you about, but
yeah,
there
we'd
was
like
an
to hear
object.
all about that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it was an object. It was high, and at that time, I think I got an echo going on. Are you guys okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're getting a little bit of an echo though.
How am I doing now?
Better.
You're doing great.
Okay. All right. So, anyway, in the backyard, there's an object. I was typing in an email, and a coworker came up to me and he said, "Hey, man, you need to see this thing in the backyard." So, okay. Well, I was kind of annoyed because I'm sitting there, structuring a sentence to send to a vendor. I'm getting ready to type this email. Okay, let's see what you got. Oh, you got to see this thing right now. So we go in the back, and there's an object in the sky. It's just a circle. And I said, okay, what a jet. He's like, no, it's just been sitting there for 10, 15 minutes. I said, okay. So we started looking at it. And then when he's like, oh, the weirdest thing is you can't see it with the daylight cameras. And we switch over to the EO wide and the EO narrow, and you can't see the object. It's a blue sky. And by the size of it, I couldn't understand why you wouldn't be able to see it. It was almost like it was cloaked. So the weirdest part of it is it didn't move, because we look at the moon and stuff all the time, and you still see the moon traversing through the sky because, planetary movement. But this thing didn't move. It was like geosynchronous. It just sat there. And then we about 5 or 6 of us were sitting there watching it, and we said, you know what? We're watching with this old analog system. Let's get a high def system and get a better standoff, so we can see it clear. And so that's what we did. We put another system in its place, and by the time the cryogenic cooler had reached its optimal temperature, then the system couldn't find it. It was gone. There was no way it could have, if it was a plane or something, it just traveled through the sky. It had vanished. And we're thinking to ourselves, well, even if it was like a blimp, it wouldn't take that long. We just couldn't figure it out.
Where'd it go?
Where did it go? Yeah, I've never seen it since. And that kind of sucks because I'm cursed now. Every time I look out the back, I'm always looking for this thing. It's just, where is it? It's gone. So it was cool to see it, but at the same time, I'm still looking for it to pop up again someday.
Okay, well, I wanted to ask you, Dean, about drones. The quadcopters, multi-rotors that people fly for a hobby. Do you mind telling us a little bit about that and how I think that you also get involved in building and flying them?
Yes. Shortly after the Aguadilla case, there was speculation, and I jumped into the whole argument. But at that time, I was building drones, and I started building them because you can buy a drone and fly it, but it's not as much fun to me because I want to know how it works because I know I'm going to crash it. And so that's what I started doing and you do crash them. If you buy a drone, that's the first law of droning is you're going to crash it.
Right.
So I'm able to rebuild, and now I've got like a little squadron of maybe 5 or 6 drones in my garage that I can fly. But anyway, when you look at them with a FLIR camera, I don't know if you had the video, but you see the legs, you see the rotors, you see the heat of the motors. It's pretty obvious it's a drone. You don't see a drone as a blob of heat. It's you're able to distinguish movement. Or you would see, like if it was a model plane or something, you'd see the heat of the propulsion. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, it does. And but you might end up being a little redundant here, but that's okay because I want our listeners to hear why you think some objects seen in FLIR videos could not be drones. Can you break it down even further or give more arguments regarding why that's the separation between that?
Okay. For example, let's take the Aguadilla case where you have the supposed object going across the island. A lot of people have said, oh, well, it probably is a drone and somebody just flew it. And I said, well, that's not really feasible because to fly a drone at night, you're going to need a couple of different things. You're going to need lights on the drone that show you the position of the drone.
I've seen that. Yep.
Yeah, so I usually have like green on the back legs, which show me it's facing away from me, and red if it gets turned around, because you have to have, if it's the wrong position in yaw, the way that you steer it, it's going to go a different direction. So anyway, you would have to be a pretty advanced drone flyer to be flying at night that much travel because typically, even the drones that I build, they only have like a mile range. So you're not able.
It's sort of like any kind of an RC aircraft, then, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I use as a Turnigy RC controller. So it only has so much range, and then once the range is done, it's just going to fall out of the sky, unless it has an auto return function or something like that. But yeah, this thing just went right into the ocean. I mean, it just didn't add up for me.
Okay, and go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and again, you would see some movement of the blades, chopping the air. You would see the heat of the motors. It's not going to be a solid ball of heat, even if it's a drone, unless you make the drone a solid-looking object and it's heated up somehow, which would be ridiculous. But anyway.
I noticed a picture where you're flying. So you have your pilot's license, and when did you get involved in that?
I'm a hobbyist, so
okay.
At the time, and I started years ago before the FAA got involved with it, a lot of the droning. Mm-hmm. I did register the drones, but now I think they're at the point where if you're like a hobbyist, then we're not concerned about you having a drones license. I think you need a license to do commercial type of applications, like if you're going to do surveying or if you're going to do like a real estate pan around the house with the drone, that kind of thing. If you're using it professionally, in essence, then you need the drones license. Otherwise, as a hobbyist, you can, you're limited to certain things. Like you can only go up like 400 feet in elevation. You're not supposed to fly at night. You're not supposed to drink a lot of beer before you fly. That kind of thing.
Okay, and then I wanted to jump to a different subject, Frank, and that is Dean, on our show a while back, we had USS Nimitz and USS Princeton folks talking about the Tic Tac object. And, something really interesting came up. I asked them, the gist of my question was, do you believe that UFO was derived from ET related technology, or do you believe it was one of ours? And one of them said it was one of ours. How do you feel about that? Does that make any sense to you? What is your perspective on that?
Well, it's a possibility. I mean, if you look at DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, they do a lot of crazy stuff and probably have technology that we're not aware of. So I wouldn't rule it out. I would say that's definitely a plausible explanation.
Okay, and wanted to ask you, going along that idea that it is ours, would it be true then that the military is ahead by, I'm just making it up, I've always heard 10 to 20 years, maybe even slightly longer, in their technology than the private sector? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I could say that's a possibility too. I think you kind of have to be high up there in order to be privy to that kind of technology. Mm-hmm. I've seen some technology when I was in the Navy that we didn't talk too much about, but it had to do with video guidance missiles, and that was just something we just didn't talk about. But it's probably a normal thing nowadays. But
well, the problem I have with it being one of ours is if the technology is maybe 10 to 20 years in the future, according to that military, that theory I just gave you about the military being ahead in the technology by 10 to 20 years, wouldn't they have to be ahead by many years, many more years than, say, 10 to 20 years to have an object traverse space like that Tic Tac did?
Well, there's a lot of, what would you say?
You're just saying it's possible still anyway, right?
Yeah. I mean, because, if you're going to go into the theory that there's reverse engineering, then, it could be, when did we come out with transistors and lasers? Did we already have that technology before? There's a lot of hypotheses going on about that.
Okay.
This breakthrough of technology like the transistor or the laser, it just, maybe these things have been kept by the government well before, the private sector was ready, or maybe they wanted a slow trickle down. I don't know.
I just played one of your videos, Dean, where there was a UFO Jacksonville. Was that the UFO you were talking about before, or is that something different?
Yeah, I was watching that, and that's it. A lot of people, when you first see the UFO and I'm making it move around, that's me moving the controller around to show that it's not a group of dead pixels or anything. That's me centering the object within the reticle. So a lot of people are like, oh, it's zipping around the sky. And I'm like, no, that's me. It's just you don't have a point of reference to show, where it is in relation to, just clear sky.
Right.
But that's what I was trying to do, is to show that it was not a camera anomaly of any sort.
Okay, and I wanted to ask you, what is the most astounding object you've seen, whether it was something you caught or something somebody else had actually caught that you had the privilege of being able to view on YouTube or anywhere else? Can you relate to us what that video or what that object was, the history behind it?
Well, the one that I caught was, firsthand experience, so obviously it's going to be a little bit more significant to me, but I did like the gimbal one, and there was also one from the NPAS, what was that, the Wales, Bristol Channel UFO. That was caught on a system that I'm very familiar with, that I work. We have fixed dozens and dozens of them, and seen many different characteristics of the system. So they were looking at an object. Again, they're traveling in like a helicopter, and they're focusing on a circle, not unlike the object that I had, some orb in the sky. And it didn't move in elevation. You know, there's probably, I don't know, they were saying it was flying into the wind. So a lot of people are saying, oh, it could be a Chinese lantern, it could be a drone. But for what I was seeing, it didn't change in elevation. That's the weirdest part for me. It's remaining at a certain altitude. And, you know, a Chinese lantern is going to be kind of similar to a balloon that's going to be erratic in its movement.
I think I might have this video up now, Dean. This looks like it's got some concentric circles within it. Is that the one?
I think so. I see. What am I looking at? I'm looking at my video.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a delay, so I'm going to it now. That's it now.
Yeah, that's it right there. So I think it's kind of maybe a little out of focus right there. And you can see them focusing in the object. But if you look, let me look here, put my glasses on again. Look, okay, see the scale over to the left-hand side?
Right,
and there's
0,
like
30, 60, 90?
Yeah, so that's your elevation.
Okay.
And it's staying kind of like, you know, they might have it at the bottom too. It's hard to see. They might have elevation down there. Yeah, I think I saw there's an elevation, but it stays about like maybe 5, 6, 7 degrees.
So does that give you what, the azimuth then? Is that what that does, or what does that do?
The azimuth is what's fluctuating. That's the elevation. The azimuth's on the bottom. You see it's at like negative 90 degrees right there. And now it's dipped below 0 degrees in elevation right there. At least there might be a delay, like you said. But, yeah, it doesn't move much in elevation. So a balloon or Chinese lantern is going to be kind of all over the place. Yeah. So that was the video from Wales, Bristol Channel, the MPAS.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and you said you like of the videos that were released by the Defense Department, you like the gimbal the best. Is that about right?
Right. Yeah, it's the...
That's the one where it's rotating.
Yeah, and it's got kind of oval-looking fashion, crisp type of outline to it, and then it's got that little point at the bottom, which isn't really something I see at all. So that's what kind of made me look at it and think, that was out of the ordinary. And then the rotation...
sorry, go ahead. Finish up, please.
Oh, yeah, I'm just... The rotation, you know, you have a fluid motion when a jet's going to turn. It's not that coarse in its rotation. Best I can describe it.
Okay, and a lot has been made of the lack of lift, that if that were an actual plane turning like that and it was holding that position sort of in that turn, you know, if it's a plane, of course, it would really just drop. It would just drop out of the sky. Is there anything in your FLIR background you could speak to that gives you an indication that that might not be a good argument?
Yeah, as far as the aerodynamics of it, I just call it like I see it. But yeah, it wouldn't, if it was moving like that, it would be more violent in turning. It wouldn't just, it just doesn't correspond to a normal jet aircraft moving in that fashion.
Okay, and the Go Fast video was another interesting one because Mick West had taken a look at it and thought that it was a bird. I looked at it and thought, well, maybe at first, but it's going at a pretty good clip. And seabirds can travel at a fast clip, but not that fast a clip. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that one as well, on the Go Fast, because he was also saying that that parallax, which is an interesting phenomenon, might have played a role in making it look like it was going faster than it actually was, because the plane is traveling as well.
Right, and that's where I kind of jump out of that science because it's not my particular field of expertise. So, but I do see it moving in that fashion, and kind of trust them to a certain extent. But again, the thing I can't agree with the theory of the bird is you don't see the flapping of wings.
Right,
again,
right.
Everybody things that are moving like these orbs are going to be drones or birds, but you see the characteristics of the object, how it's moving. I see, you know, even birds that are like miles out, I can see a flapping of wings, or I can see the seagull-shaped look of their outline. And you know, a drone, I can see that it's moving parts. It's not just a blob. So that's where I'm left with that.
Yeah, and there has been talk that some of these objects might be drones. I mean, they would obviously be more the type of the military drones that we see photographed as sort of triangular shaped drones as compared to sort of the bolted together drones that people get privately. A little bit of a difference there. What rules out drone in your mind for any of the DoD videos that were released?
I guess the travel, like some of that speed, because I know the drones that I make, and again, they're not high end, but I don't know, you can get maybe 50 miles an hour out of them. But
Okay.
it depends on the motor speed and how robust you build this drone. And just the area that they're in, who's going to fly a drone out in the middle of the ocean around a U.S. naval vessel? It just doesn't make sense. But
yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's a good point. See, this is the thing. If this is one of ours, the problem I have with it is exactly what you just said. Why would DARPA or any agency that is from our government want to fly over another one of our government agencies or one of our branches of military? What do you think of that?
Well, unless they're playing like, simulation war games where they're testing out, hey, how does this F-18 maneuver in relation to what we just created? If they're trying to test the capabilities of the aircrafts, I could see that. But the pilots are saying, no, it just popped up out of nowhere. And then, they explain their experience. And then, if they're going to tell a pilot, they would say, hey, look, we're going to launch this aircraft. You guys are going to chase it for a little bit. They're going to debrief you on that. They're not just going to throw it out there.
Right.
At least the Navy that I know, unless they've changed their protocol.
Right. So this is the thing. There's pilots coming out saying that they didn't know what it was they saw. And so if it was one of ours and we would, in theory, at least brief them, wouldn't we at least let them know, by the way, this was just a test. We're just testing our equipment to see what your reaction would be, whether you would go ahead and use the best of your training in order to track this UAP. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that would occur at the debriefing. You go through this experience, and then they would probably pull you aside in a war room and say, hey, look, we were just messing with you. We got this new thing out there, and here's the capabilities. And you would use.
So then that leads me to ask you again. Then how could it be one of ours if we're not briefing them in that way? Because then why would pilots come out and say, I don't know what I saw? Because they really don't. Yeah,
the only thing I could think of is maybe they were doing a separate type of a project, and there was an intercept between, the planes on the aircraft carrier, whatnot, flying, and then this project, hypothetical project, maybe there was just an intercept, but I don't see why they would do that. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, because my understanding is the military and any agency that would want to have a UAP in the sky, so to speak, we'll just call it a UAP, and intentionally so, would probably know what's going to be in the sky that day. You would imagine, because they don't want it to intersect and crash with anything. So it would be a planned event, right?
That's what I would think. I'm just trying to keep all options open,
Yeah, I've thought about this, and just ever since was it Voorhees, by the way, that said that?
It was Gary, yep.
Okay. Gary, I believe it was Gary, Frank's right, said, yeah, he thought it was one of ours. I was thinking, as you can clearly see for a while, well, how could that be? Wouldn't we want to let them know we're going to have that kind of exercise? If we're not going to, why? I don't know. Was it a social experiment with their own people? It just makes me wonder.
It might have been just an ET spacecraft too. You never know.
It could also be, difference in government agencies. They don't always cooperate. You could have the CIA doing something and be like, we need to fly over this way, and then, oh, dang it, there's that aircraft carrier. It could be something. There's no communication between the military and a government agency. I just like to think that there's other explanations, but Yeah, that's the thing. The government always doesn't cooperate with itself. It's
Right. They're known for that.
right. Yeah, they do that.
Okay. So anyway, just I'm sorry. There's one last thing I have to say about this, and that is, let's just pretend DARPA, for the heck of it, actually had a planned UAP event that was going to happen, and they do need to know who's going to be out in the sky that day. Wouldn't that be the military's hint if they're being asked by DARPA, "Hey, are you guys flying today?" There could be a UAP related event that's going to happen.
Possibly, but this is, they might have their own way of knowing that.
No, see, that's what I was going to ask you. Do you think that DARPA and other government agencies have a way of actually knowing what's going to be in the sky, even if they don't ask the military if they're going to be flying that day? Is there a way for them to find out?
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
there was, and we found this out after the fact, but it is known that there was a test of a hypersonic craft in the general vicinity of the Nimitz encounter during that time frame, and obviously what they captured on video doesn't look anything like what was being tested or anything along those lines, but it's not been confirmed, as far as I know, that anybody on the ship actually knew about that test going on. I don't know if they did or they didn't, but you would think they would have.
Exactly.
Yep.
Now, go ahead.
No, that just agreed.
Okay, so let me just go ahead and be blunt here and ask you, Dean, do you believe that there's extraterrestrial life that's visiting our planet? Or they've always been here, whatever your perspective is, but do you believe that there's extraterrestrial life that's intelligent enough to traverse around our skies?
I do, because I think Jodie Foster said in that Contact movie, it'd be an awful waste of space if there wasn't other life forms. Yeah, the more we figure out, I think, and there's other things that are on this planet that you can watch in Ancient Aliens. I think sometimes Ancient Aliens kind of stretches things to generate a show, but they do have some, what is it? I think it's in Peru, but there's that mountaintop.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there's a few of that. I thought you were going in a different direction, but yeah, I know what you mean. Yep.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I do think there's things that can't be explained, and the only explanation is some kind of outside alien interaction. The only thing that I've had was that one shot that you showed earlier that was the orb up in the sky, and that may or may not be explained sometime in the future. But as far as aliens, being in the government, reptile people, that's a hard one for me to accept.
Yeah.
I think there's conspiracy theories, but where I'm going with that.
Yeah, your interest in this started with Aguadilla, as you mentioned, and that predated the more recent videos coming out when the two at first and then the one later on in March of last year came out, the Gimbal and the FLIR, and then in March of 2018, the Go Fast video. What was your initial response to those?
In the FLIR, but the Gimbal is the one that stood out to me. Because if you're going to say it's a jet propulsion and you're looking at the rear of the aircraft, that's where I said that doesn't look like it at all. So, and I have video to compare. So that's why I got involved in that one. But it was interesting to me. It was very, I can't think of the word for that. It's just very odd occurrence.
Okay, so going along the idea that you do believe that there is an ET or ET civilizations out there that are visiting the planet or have always been here, you do believe also, would it be correct to say that they have the capability of going under the water too?
Yeah, I don't think they have, and this is just a theory, but I don't think their technology is the same as us, that it's limited to atmospheric type of interference. Like when you see the object from the Aguadilla go into the water, it remains at a constant speed. It doesn't slow down as a normal, let's say you're launching a missile into the water. it's going to slow down because now you're traveling through water and it's more friction than the air. It's obvious. But I think there might be some kind of gravitational field that doesn't matter what kind of medium you're traveling through, or I don't know. I just speculate at that point.
And
Frank?
after those videos came out, that's when you went out and really started doing some testing. Is that about right? Or did you do that for the Aguadilla video as well?
No, it started with the Aguadilla, and that's when I did some testing and comparing because, you know, I was working with the guys and they asked me to do certain things, and some things I could do. You know, it's like coincidental. If I'm testing a system out back, then yeah, I can do a little bit of a test or something, but I can't just stop working and, you know, do all these other tests. It's got to be coincidental.
Right.
But yeah, my interest in I guess the whole experimentation started with Aguadilla, and then it kind of advanced a little bit after that with the Go Fast and I'm sorry, the Gimbal.
And FLIR app apparently is available for mobile phones. Do you know anything about that? And how good is that system if you're familiar with it?
Yeah, I actually have one.
Okay.
It's called the FLIR 1, and it takes thermal imaging that's long wave. It's not mid wave, but it's an uncooled FLIR, and it overlaps your normal camera that you'd have on your phone onto the infrared. So you're kind of looking at two things at once.
Okay.
But it's good for applications like if you're looking around the house, you want to see if your windows are leaking or your insulation in your AC system, like the ducting and all that. If you want to look up in your attic and see if something's leaking, you'll be able to see it blow out. It's definitely, it sees in the dark just like a normal thermal imager would. So you can go outside and not have any light at all, any ambient light, and you can still see objects. Like if somebody was standing in your backyard, you'll see the person there because it's looking at heat. It's not looking at light. So
Right.
yeah, it's kind of a lower resolution, but for fun, you know, or if you have a scientific reason to use it, yeah, I'd recommend it.
Okay.
What's the cost point on that? That way, the price point, so folks have an idea of what they can expect to pay for something like that.
Yeah, the last time I bought mine, it's a second generation. I think that was $250, and I think they have a third generation now that there's like a little thumb wheel that the lightning port will extend out of the FLIR itself to allow for like a cell phone case. To where I have an extender on mine, but I like this option on the third generation. I think it's the same price, $250. But you're able to just plug it in. You don't have to worry about taking the case off or having an extender.
How about the equipment that you have that's FLIR related? What's the actual cost of that, or just a rough idea? What kind of money do people need to look forward to investing in order to actually get to where you're at to use the equipment that you do?
Yeah.
Or do you just borrow it for free from work?
Right.
No, I mean I operate them all the time, but this is government-owned equipment that's high-end equipment. Like just one camera to replace a camera might be $60,000 or $70,000, and that doesn't even involve the magnification. So, you know, rough estimate maybe $1 million. You know, it's an airborne system, so this is the stuff that the government works on, and there's all associated cables, the hand controllers. Yeah, it's going to be well outside the realm.
You don't want to play cheap on the cables if you're spending all that money on the gear.
Cables alone will run you in the thousands. So
just for like a regular person, let's say I've got a sky watch tonight, and it looks like it's going to be kind of clear, and it's going to be a great night. What would you recommend? Do you recommend folks stay with the night vision, or maybe they take a look at FLIR? And is a consumer level setup, you know, is the price comparable to night vision, or can you tell us a little bit about that?
If you're saying night vision, you mean like the near IR where you're kind of like looking at.
I just know that a friend of mine had a night vision monocular, and it was pretty interesting to see what you could see through that thing. So I really have never looked at the different options that are available or the pricing. I just wanted to get an idea if somebody decided, you know what, I think maybe FLIR technology would be better for me than using the night vision. So I'll take a look at that. Is that, you know, a viable option price-wise, and what you'll get out of the results?
Yeah, the only problem with the near IR, the night vision, if you wanted to use those interchangeably, is that you're still depending on light. Your ambient light from the moon, something like that. You're not looking at a thermal image. You're not looking at a heat signature. So if you want to go into the realm of actual heat, I mean, FLIR Systems Inc., FSI, you've kind of been flashing some of their products on the screen. They offer a wide variety of options with magnification. I mean, you can have these things on your rifle if you want an infrared scope, that kind of thing. But yeah, that's actually a market that needs to be explored, I would say, because they're just stuck right now at the FLIR 1, which is the thing that you can plug into your iPhone. They kind of would, I don't know, if they came up with something that was more higher resolution and it had some magnification to it, then I would recommend that. And they probably do, but they're probably handheld units. I haven't explored that too much. So you can go the low light realm, but you're not going to get the same results as you would with the thermal imagers.
Okay, and the gear that you did your testing with, that's the government gear? You know, the F-18 and all that?
Right.
Okay.
Dean, there's a person, I don't want to say this individual's name, but they do tours regarding, I guess, sky tours, you know, astronomy-related ones where they take somebody out, a group of folks out into the desert, look up in the sky with night vision binoculars. Military issue level is what they say they are. Wanted to let you know that I've known a few people to go on these tours, and one of them is an astronomer, and he said that all they were looking at was satellites. Do you have any perspective regarding folks who take people out into the desert and say, you're looking at ET craft and misjudging it when they don't actually realize it's satellites that they're looking at? Do you have any insight on that?
I don't have any experience with that. So I don't know how well you're going to be able to pick up a satellite with, you know, that type of equipment. I thought that they were pretty much, you would need some pretty strong magnification as far as I would think. Yeah.
Well, with the night vision, you can see some things really well, and they are kind of blown up. I can just tell you from personal experience that you can, and that is you know, a very interesting technology, of course, that is used for that, and it is helpful. You will be able to spot satellites that you might not normally be able to see, but you got to remember that those satellites, even they're reflecting a little bit of light because they're up higher and they're still catching the sun. The sun, you know, likely has just gone down. They're at an altitude way up there where you can still see them, and then of course once in a while they'll flare up because they've got the big solar panels on them, and they'll reflect a lot of light. And a lot of the folks who are out on these sky watches, they do think that what they're seeing is ET craft, but in communicating with them. But in reality, you know, what they're seeing is just light reflecting off solar panels on a satellite, and it can flare up, and it can really get your attention, and it's very impressive.
Okay, I can go with that. Yeah, I don't have any exposure to that, so.
What about exposure though to satellites? Do you ever see satellites going by during the day or at night when you're using the equipment you do from the government in order to survey the skies? Do you ever come across them?
No, and I'm not quite sure why, but I think it has to do with the atmosphere, because once you get so far,
they likely get washed out during the day. It's at night when you can see them, and even then you can see them a lot better when they're directly overhead in the darkest spot of the sky.
Right. So yeah, I can theorize it. Yeah, it's possible. It's just I work the day check, so I would never know.
Also, the folks that you work with, do they ever, or throughout the history of ever being around people that use the kind of equipment you do, through the many years you've done it, has anybody ever confided in you, whether they work with you or you know them personally, that they have seen an object that they believe to be ET craft related?
Well, besides the one pilot that I mentioned earlier, now it's pretty much, it's a technical shop. They show up and they do their work, and I get a variety of beliefs and ideas that some people will say, yeah, it's still weird, and the guy that first approached me when I was on the computer, he still agrees. Why was that sitting in the sky for 10, 15 minutes? But then other people are like, no, that was just the ISS or something. And,
right.
Things like that. So it's.
I've seen the ISS, and it does move. I mean, you can see it moving. It doesn't sit there.
Yeah, exactly. So and
it's moving at a good clip.
But.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see what else wanted to see. So that Puerto Rico Aguadilla UFO case, when did that come to your attention, by the way, before we let that topic go?
It was not too long after the SCU, I guess, flew out to Puerto Rico and then, did their analysis and then came back.
How did it catch your attention, though? Did you actually see it in your Facebook feed, their report that they may have done a post on, or did somebody bring it to your attention, or did you just do a search on it? How did you know about it?
I'm not sure if I did a search on it or if like an algorithm threw it at me, but I was just looking at things online and that popped up and I said, oh, I haven't seen this before. And then one thing led to another after that.
Ah, okay. Well, yeah, that's an absolutely astounding case, and they did a really amazing report on it. I highly recommend people check that out. I did leave the link to it in the chat. And Frank, did you have any other questions?
No, we are good. We covered a lot of technical ground today, and I did stay a little bit focused on getting those videos up and played, but I think they'll be helpful as well. Dean, it's been great.
Oh, thanks for having me. I had a good time today.
Absolutely. Yeah, we got through everything pretty efficiently, so I think it was a great show. I'm very pleased about it.
Oh, I think it was a great show, too. I look forward to seeing it after you guys get it all published.
Yep, it'll be up and should be processed shortly. And Chant, do you have anything else before we wrap up?
I don't. I just wanted to tell Dean that it's been a privilege and an honor to have the ability to interview him. And thank you so much for having spent time with us on a Sunday. I know you have a family, and we're just very grateful that you took a little time out of your day to be interviewed. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Dave. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys for having me, and we'll talk soon.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so we're going to wrap things up. Fantastic show today. Thanks very much, Chant, and thanks again, Dean. And we will be back. I think our next scheduled show is next Sunday, and we've got some more stuff coming up. And Chant, one of these days soon, you will be following up on that smoking gun document, and we'll get the rest of what you got lined up on that. When do you think you want to do that? I'm putting you on the spot by asking you on the air.
That's fine. I know you and I talk about this often. Look, I'm just going to be honest with you. I got a little burned out on it because I was researching it so much. But yeah, I think it would be a bad idea for us to go ahead and focus in on doing that, say next week. So,
this coming week.
Okay, sure. You're right, this coming week, because you and I have a lot of research. We've done extensive research on that topic that we have not shared with anybody, and I think the timing wouldn't be bad to do that. So.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they've had a couple of months and they really haven't added anything to that mix. So, yeah, we definitely want to go ahead and do that.
Good point.
I think we found out more interesting stuff about the case, even the material that they could spin in their own direction. But we found out a lot of good stuff, and let's focus on that during the week. And I think next Sunday, Professor Kevin Knuth is going to be back, and then Derek Gilbert, who's going to be hosting a conference coming coming up in Missouri in September, and we're going to be talking to him. So we've got quite a few more things lined up, and that is about it. Let's wrap things up and turn the fan back on and cool off. So have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. Thank you.